Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel where we discuss all things logistics. Today, I'm coming to you with a video on key terminology that you must know in order to be successful in the trucking industry. I did do this video via live yesterday. However, for some reason, YouTube is not allowing me to leave it posted for you all. And it does suck because we had a really good Q&A after the live, and people asked some really good questions. But if you all have any questions when you're watching this, of course, as always, feel free to leave them in the comments section. As you can see, I'm sharing my screen and it is showing the terminology list. And I'm just going to start from the beginning and work my way all the way down to the end, explaining what each term means. We're going to kick it off with carrier. A carrier is the person, it could be a person or it can be an organization that is carrying the load, who is responsible for carrying the freight. So if they are doing it under a company name, a business name, XYZ Trucking, or whatever the case may be, they are the carrier. Then there's a driver. Now, sometimes the driver is not an owner operator, and I know a lot of people get that mixed up where they assume that these drivers are all owner operators, and that is not always the case. Sometimes they just work for the carrier. And in that case, it could be an owner operator who has several trucks, and he or she has hired drivers for some of those trucks to get those loads moved. That driver may not necessarily own the truck just because they're carrying the load or just because they are a driver or a carrier. So they kind of mixed in with the next one, which was owner operator. An owner operator owns and operates his own fleet. Okay, he's the owner, he's the driver, he's the carrier. That's the owner operator. Next, we move on to carrier profile. So, and underneath that, I have carrier packet. And some people get the two mixed up. When it comes to carrier profile, that is what you as the dispatcher will provide to the carrier before you decide to do business with them. You'll have your own set of onboarding paperwork, and part of your onboarding paperwork will be a carrier profile. The carrier profile is going to ask a specific set of questions that basically you'll be able to use that information that's on the carrier profile to book that carrier's loads. And you'll basically take the information that's on the carrier profile and transfer that onto the carrier packets. If you have a really good carrier profile, you shouldn't have to turn around and keep calling your carrier to ask certain information before you book a load for them, because you should have included all of those questions within your carrier profile. So a good carrier profile is detailed. And basically, like I said, you're going to provide that to the carrier before you decide to do business with them. It'll be a part of your onboarding paperwork. And then when it comes to carrier packets, that's something you're going to receive from the broker. And you're going to have to complete that on behalf of your carrier. Okay, I hope that's making sense to you. So the carrier profile you provide to your driver or your carrier, right? And the carrier packet is what the broker is going to provide to you to complete on the carrier's behalf. So next we have ETA. A lot of people are familiar with ETA. It's estimated time of arrival. You're going to hear that often in this industry. You're going to have brokers asking you, what's the carrier's ETA? You're going to be asking, maybe if you're not using a certain system that allows you to track them, then you'll be asking, hey, what's your ETA, so that you can provide it to the broker and make sure everything goes smoothly. So again, that is estimated time of arrival. Next, we have something that you all should be familiar with right now, or by now, if you've already gone through my videos. I explain what a BOL and a POD is, but again, since we're going over terminology, I'll address it. A BOL is the bill of lading. It is received from the shipper. So when the carrier gets to the shipper to pick up the load, they are going to be giving a bill of lading. The bill of lading kind of gives them details of what the load is, what condition it's in, what's the weight of it, what the commodity is, and all of that good stuff. And when the carrier gets to the receiver, they will sign stating like, yes, we did receive this load. And now that same sheet of paper, that BOL or bill of lading, has became a proof of delivery, a POD. So exact same sheet of paper, except the bill of lading is not signed. Proof of delivery is signed. It's received at the shipper, and it is signed at the receiver. And once it's signed by the receiver, it is now POD, proof of delivery. Next, another set of terms you may hear can be scale light or scale heavy. Now, when they are saying to scale light, they are telling the carrier that they need to stop at a weigh station or get weighed before they are loaded. And then the same thing for scale heavy. After you're loaded or after they're loaded, they have to get weighed. This is very important. When it comes to little details like this is what you'll find on the Raycon. So it's very, 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 a lot of these terms you're going to see on the Raycon. So that's why it's important that you know what they mean so that you know what you're agreeing to as the dispatcher on the carrier's behalf. If you do get a Raycon and it says scale light, yes, you're automatically going to be sending that Raycon over to your carrier. However, I include these details in my text message or email, however you're sending them their load. I'll let them know, like, hey, here's your load for today. They want you to scale light. This is very important because, yes, they get the Raycon, but as their dispatcher, just make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. Let them know that it says to scale heavy. In a perfect world, everyone would read every little detail, but that's what they hire you to do. So if there's something that kind of sticks out, we have to make sure it gets done, or they're not going to get paid. If they skip scaling light and they just go get loaded, how can they scale light now? They can only scale heavy, and now they did not complete the terms of the Raycon, meaning now that broker has a reason to not pay them for completing their load. So you want to be careful with that. So again, scale light, that means empty. They want the weight with the truck empty, with the trailer empty, and then they want it scaled or weighed with it loaded. Next, we have factoring company. A factoring company basically purchases the invoices from the carrier and pays it out, and they wait that time period for the payout, because sometimes some of these brokers can take 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 45, whatever amount of days is within the terms of how long they can take to pay you. And a lot of these owner operators or a lot of these carriers, they do not have time to wait that amount of days. This is their bread and butter. This is how they take care of their families. So they want their money right away. It's their money and they need it now. So with that being said, they have factoring companies, and the factoring companies will purchase the invoice. Normally it's between 1% and 5% what they charge, and it does depend on the owner operators or the carrier's credit. So that's something that they'll already have set up. And again, that factoring company basically just pays them out within 24 to 72 hours. The longest I've seen is that 48-hour mark as far as the payout, but sometimes they can take up to 72 hours. And in that case, that carrier receives their money from the factoring company. So when the whole invoicing thing happens, you as the dispatcher are going to invoice the factoring company. You'll still send your proof of delivery over to the broker just so you completed your end of the bargain, but you also send that stuff over to the factoring company. And you'll receive something called a notice of assignment. Now, a notice of assignment is what you're going to receive from your carrier. So the carrier gets it from their factoring company and gives it to you. Now, this is something you're going to have on file, again, as part of your onboarding paperwork. This is so you're not having to reach out to your carrier and ask for this information. When you book that load, this is part of what, along with that carrier packet that you're going to send over, and also like a COI, which I'll go over that soon. When you send this stuff over to the broker, you're also going to give them an NOA, which is a notice of assignment, and that's going to let them know that they are actually going to pay out a factoring company, and they can expect to get the information from a factoring company as opposed to you. So next we have bobtail / PO / drop and hook. And I did it like that because they kind of all go together. So when a tractor is by itself without a trailer attached to it, it is bobtailing when it's driving, when it's on the road. It's called bobtailing. That would mean it's just a tractor, no trailer attached, and it's riding. PO is power only. So a person that only has a carrier that only has a tractor, they do not have a trailer, they're considered power only. And the types of loads that they typically do are drop and hook loads, or hook and drop loads is what that should say. So they would arrive on site at the shipper, and they would pick up a trailer that they've been assigned. They would hook it to their tractor and they would go drop it to the destination. Okay, so those kind of all go hand in hand together. Again, that would be for power only loads, and you'll see PO. It doesn't mean purchase order. It means power only, and they all go hand in hand. So next we have deadhead. Deadhead means the amount of miles that a carrier is driving while empty, meaning he's not getting paid or she's not getting paid for these miles. So that can be the miles that it takes them to drive to the shipper or whatever, or to the next destination, wherever. It's deadhead. It means there's nothing inside their trailer. It is empty. They're not on a load. So for instance, if I had a carrier that was based, their truck was parked in Chicago, but their pickup was in South Holland, they would have about 30 deadhead miles or 40 deadhead miles that they have to travel before they have a load. Okay, so that's the amount that they're driving empty. Deadheading means you have no load. Next, we have swing doors. Now, swing doors you're going to see often with like the 53-foot dry vans or the 53-foot reefers. They'll say, or it'll list on the load board in the comments, will say must have 53-foot dry van with swing doors, must have 53-foot reefer with swing doors. And swing doors, they come out like the French doors, like they open up like this. It's not a roll up, it's literally the doors open, side to side. And that's what a lot of these brokerages are requiring nowadays. So just so you're aware, if you see this online, it's something that you'll already know. You should have captured with your carrier profile, so you'll already be aware that, okay, they do have swing doors. Most of the time it's with like box trucks that you don't see the swing doors, but quite often when you hear about the dry vans and reefers and so on, most of them do have the swing doors, but it's still something you'll need to clarify, because when you go on the load board, the brokers will be specific as to what type of trailer they would like you to have. So in that case, it would be swing doors most often. And again, you have to be careful with this Raycon, because let's just say the broker didn't say it on the telephone. However, you're looking over the Raycon and you're seeing something about swing doors, and that's not what your carrier has. And you sign that contract. Now you have them in a legally binding contract that states that they have to have swing doors when they get on site, and they don't have that. So then they're going to end up getting turned around for the load, and it could just be a big headache. So make sure you're reading the Raycon. Next, we have empty, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It kind of goes hand in hand with deadhead, but not moving. So empty. A lot of the times when you're booking loads with different brokers, they'll ask, is the truck empty? Meaning, are they ready to go? If I gave you this load right now, could that carrier leave and go pick up this load? They're asking if it's empty because of the risk of a detention. Sometimes you can book these loads, and if your carrier is already on a load, this is how the broker is looking at it. They're looking at it like, okay, if this carrier is already on a load, but they're not empty yet, it's still a risk that they can go into detention, which means that they may or may not be able to pick up my load in time. So they will ask you if it's empty, and what they mean is, are they under another load, basically? Or are they ready to go as soon as I give you this load? Next, we have shipper. The shipper is the supplier. That's where they get the BOL from. That's the first location that the carrier will go to pick up the actual load. They're picking it up from the supplier. They're picking it up from the shipper. And next you have receiver. Receiver is the one that is receiving the load. That is where the carrier is going to drop the load at. They're going to drop it to the receiver and get that BOL signed so that it becomes a POD. Next, we have HOS, which means hours of service. Now, I have an hours of service video that kind of goes into detail, letting you know what you need to know as a dispatcher, which is, how long they can be on duty, how many hours they can drive, straight before they need a break, and so on and so forth. This is important because you do not want to force them into a violation. So when you're booking their loads up, you have to make sure you're leaving enough time in between for them to get their resets in, or else, their goal is to remain in compliance. And you don't want to be the reason why they're, possibly going into violation because you booked their loads up and now they're trying to hurry up and make it to a destination before they run out of hours, and it can be a big mess. So what you need to know about hours of service is how long that they can be on duty, how many hours they can drive, and how long their reset needs to be, and how much time they have in between to take their breaks. So all of that is in my hours of service video. You can kind of get more details on and take some notes on that, but you will need to know the basics. You don't have to be alarmed, like feeling like you have to calculate like all their hours to a T, but you need to have an idea. If you have to ever reach out to your carrier and say, how many hours do you have on your clock? You don't have to feel bad about that. They know you're not exact, you may not have the exact hours that they have left, but you'll know a roundabout in your head, and you'll at least know what it takes to stay within compliance. That's what matters. There's a lot of like apps that they have now, like Motive, that allows you to track this. So you'll literally be able to go right in. And it's not something that you have to necessarily have as a dispatcher. Most of the time, if you're dealing with a carrier who has drivers, they will have this already in place where you can just log into their system and you'll be able to see where their drivers are in real time, and kind of has a GPS letting you know, hey, they're going 50 miles an hour, they're right here, they're parked on the side of the road, or whatever the case may be. It gives you all that good information. It also lets you know how many hours they have used, how many they have left, so you'll have an idea without even having to reach out to that specific driver. Okay, so next we have OTR, that is over the road. Now, people who have carriers that have day cabs, they typically go and they do daily routes. They're not over the road because they don't have a bunk in the back. They don't have a sleeper. So therefore, they can't sleep inside of their truck. So they will run daily runs where they're at home every single day, or local runs where they're able to go home at, in the evening, or they'll have to get a hotel and all this other craziness. So people that go over the road, you'll get those great carriers who will say, hey, I'm out for 2 months this time, and you'll know as their dispatcher that you can run them, wherever they allow according to the carrier profile, wherever the money is. And they'll let you know, hey, I just want to be back by Thanksgiving. Run me until Thanksgiving. And you'll know around that time to start working them back toward home. But those are carriers that like to go over the road. They have a sleeper. They have that bunk bed in the back. Next, we have TONU. TONU is truck order not used. Now, this is when you have booked a load, signed a rate con with a broker, and for some reason it's canceled, or for some reason you get the carrier gets on site and there's no load for them to pick up, or it's not ready. That will go under truck order not used. Most of the time, they pay that they'll give you like $150. They'll give the carrier like $150. That's what and you'll know upfront what they're paying for TONU, because that's part of the rate con. It lets you know how much they're paying for detention. It lets you know how much they're paying for TONU. It lets you know what they're paying for layover. You'll have all those details on your rate con. That's why it's important for you to read it. And so at that point, if you have dispatched your carrier and they are en route to pick up a load, but you get that phone call from the broker saying, never mind, they owe you TONU, or they owe your carrier TONU. And at that time, you can let them know, like, hey, I'm expecting a revised rate con that, shows that reflects TONU. Because now it won't be what you agreed upon. If that carrier was about to get $1,100 for that load, but now he's not picking up that load, or she's not picking up that load, they would give you a revised rate con that just says TONU $150, because you're going to use that rate con to invoice. Okay, so again, that's truck order not used. If they cancel like the day before and you still have enough time to book them another load, or if that carrier was not even en route there yet, or, then you can't expect TONU. However, if they were already en route, or if they made it there, or anything of that nature, 5 minutes away, like, yes, they have to get TONU because it's an inconvenience and they could have been on another load. Next, we have COI, which is Certificate of Insurance. Certificate of Insurance is basically the policy information. Lets you know what they have in cargo, what they have in, coverage, what type of coverage they have on their particular tractor or trailer. And that is important because every time you're booking a load, you're going to have to deal with COIs. They want to update a COI. And in this case, as their dispatcher, you will reach out to to your carrier's insurance agent to get this. Now, it's different ways to get updated COIs. Sometimes, like Progressive has a website where you go on their website and you'll be able to do it yourself just by logging in. You'll be able to go right into the system and put in the broker's information, and it'll allow you to download and update a COI, which you can then send to the broker. But sometimes you have to shoot an email to the agent, or you may have to place a phone call to the agent to get that updated COI. This is not something that's like going to take you a long time to do. It's not really hard to do. It's not as complicated as it may sound. But yes, get familiar with COIs, and you will need to update it one every time you're working with a new brokerage. Next, we have TL, which is truckload, and it's basically saying the full weight capacity of the trailer. Which is, it goes up like 45,000 pounds. I really say anything over like 40,000 pounds is a full truckload. But yes, because most carriers are not going to, even though they can carry up to 45,000 pounds, they don't want to push you to the limit. They don't want to put all of that on their trailers. So a truckload is the full weight capacity. Then you have picks and drops. Picks are basically the shippers that your carrier is going to, and drops are the receivers that your carrier is going to. And sometimes there can be multiple picks, and sometimes there can be multiple drops. Again, sometimes the broker will let you know this on the phone. Most of the time they will, but sometimes they won't, and you'll get that paperwork and they'll say, and you'll call them back like, hold on, it didn't say anything about multiple picks and multiple drops, and they'll say, oh, well, it's just 10 minutes away. But that's the issue, because what if your carrier goes into detention? Now, the more stops they're making, the more chances they have to go into detention. So if they have two picks or two pickups, then that's two places that they can possibly go into detention, which can screw up the whole rest of the load. Same thing for drops. So sometimes they'll tell you like, hey, well, it's just 10 minutes away, and that's all good and dandy, but I need to get some more money for my carrier, because that's multiple things that they have to do, and they need to be paid for that. They need to be compensated for that. Next, you have CPM, which is cents per mile. That, again, is going to be on your carrier profile. You should have already talked to your carrier about what's the minimum CPM that they want to accept. So when you're booking loads for them, you'll know like, hey, I can't take this, load. I can't sign for this load because it doesn't match up with the minimum CPM. And sometimes you may get a carrier that's not being realistic, and if you keep running into, if you notice according to the market that what you're asking for has to be adjusted, you'll just simply have that conversation with your carrier and let them know like, hey, I know you wanted at least this, but this is what the market is going for right now. Now, this happens when you're booking solely off the load board, just so you all know. Next, we have commodity. Commodity is the actual product. It's whatever it is that's being hauled. So if the carrier is picking up a load of bread, 40,000 pounds of bread, then the commodity is bread. If he's picking up paper, the commodity is paper. So the commodity is whatever they are picking up, whatever they will be hauling within their trailer. That is the commodity. Next, we have lane. The lane is basically the origin to the destination. So where they're picking up from and where they're dropping it. That is the lane. And when you're trying to get dedicated lane, you're trying to get a dedicated origin and a dedicated destination that your carrier can go to daily, weekly, or whatever the case may be. So that is the lane. Next, we have loaded miles, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is the miles that your carrier will be driving while loaded. That is not including deadhead miles, because remember, deadhead, they are empty. So loaded miles, they actually have the load, and this is where they're traveling, or how many miles they're traveling before they drop the load. Next, we have what I keep bringing up, which is the rate con, which is also known as the rate confirmation. It used to be called load tender. You may still see that on some rate cons, but basically it is a legally binding contract that gives you all the terms of the load. This is what you need to read very carefully. This is what's going to let you know all of the layover information, the detention information, the pickup time, the drop time, the weight, the commodity. You're going to get all that information from the rate con. You're going to see the broker's information listed. You're going to see the carrier's company information listed. This is the legally binding contract that you're putting the carrier into. It's going to let you know if they're requesting something to be tarped, if they're requesting them to have low locks, low bars, whatever the case may be. Again, this is why you have to be careful and read, because it's quite often it's stuff that the broker may have slipped their mind, or they didn't get a chance to mention it, or they thought they mentioned it. Whatever the case may be, you need to make sure that when you're on the phone and you're booking that load, that you have a pen and paper ready and you're jotting down what this broker is throwing at you while you're on the phone, because they'll just spit all the information. You scribble it down so that when that rate con comes, you'll know that it's what you agreed upon, or you'll know if you need to be stopping before you sign it, because once you sign it, it's signed. You can call that broker back and say, hey, you never said nothing about this, and now you get to renegotiate. Or you never said anything about this, and my carrier doesn't have load locks, so we can't take this load. Whatever the case may be, that rate confirmation, keep in mind, is one of the most important documents that you're going to deal with on a daily basis on behalf of your carrier. And it's something that you do not need to be scanning. It's something that you need to read carefully. Even part of my training, when I'm training my mentees, I have them go through these rate cons. Like, what's wrong with it? Is this what we talked about? Is this what, and they have to go through and find the issues, find the mistakes that are within the rate con, and get them corrected before signing. You're going to do that often, and you have to be able to catch it as the dispatcher. Next, we have certificate holder. Now, that goes with the COI. The certificate holder is a third party that gets added to the carrier's insurance policy while they are under the load. Now, you will have to add the certificate holder, which is what I talked about as far as contacting the insurance company to get it done. However, the good thing is you don't have to remove them. So once you add them, they're added. And what I want to know with both the COI and the carrier packets, this is not something that you have to keep completing every single time you book a load for a company that you've already worked with. So let's just say today you ran a load with JB Hunt, and tomorrow you're about to run another load with them. You're only going to have to do that carrier packet and COI once. You won't have to turn around and do it again unless it's been like 6 months or more since you've run a load for that specific broker. And in that case, they'll want an updated carrier packet, and they'll want an updated COI. But if you've just recently done this, they don't want you to do it again. They're not going to require you to. So you won't have to. And you'll call some people and they'll say, hey, they don't feel like getting a carrier packet done. They don't feel like having to wait for that to be processed. So they prefer someone that's already in their system, meaning they already have the carrier packet on file. And in that case, you would unfortunately miss out on those loads. But yes, that happens often where they want you're not required to do the COI. That is if, or the carrier packet. And that is if you recently ran a load for them. You don't have to do it again. You have to do those when it's a company that you haven't worked with at all or in a while, as far as your specific carrier. Next, we have DOT. Now, that's Department of Transportation. If you don't know, become familiar with it. Next, after that, we have MC, and it does not stand for Man Crush. It stands for motor carrier or motor carrier number. When you're calling these brokers, they're going to say, what's the MC? What's the MC? They're not asking what's the carrier's name. They'll verify that once they type in the MC number. They'll say, oh, is this such and such trucking? And you'll say yay or nay. But that is their name. That is their name. That's their social security number. That's their address. The MC number. You as the dispatcher, you do not have to have an MC number because you're not a broker. You are working under the MC number of your carrier. So you're representing them. Everything you're doing is under their MC number. Next, we have TFPAY. TFPAY is something you'll negotiate, or it may already be within your rate the contract that you're going to sign. But basically, it's when the broker is wanting the carrier to cover the load with the TARP. And normally I've seen a range from $20 to $100 depending on how much work they're going to have to do. But it is something that if they do mention it, you will want to make sure that there is some type of compensation for that, because it's not easy. They actually have to get out there and bust a little sweat putting those tarps on. You may want to take the time to Google some videos of tarps or of carriers putting tarps on their loads so that you can have a full understanding of the work that it's going to take for them to put the tarp over the load. And that way you can negotiate from a place of understanding instead of just throwing numbers out there. Next, we have lumper. I mentioned this yesterday during my live. Like, I used to think that they were saying lumber. And I was like, okay, I got to pay for lumber. No, okay, lumper. Lumper is a third party laborer who's going to do the loading and unloading, so that the carrier doesn't have to. And lumper fees range from, I've seen them be $200 all the way to $500 and $600, depending on the size of the load that they are unloading or loading. So there is a lumper fee. Most of the time those happen with like reefer loads or refrigerated loads. And up front, normally the broker will let you know, like, hey, there's going to be a lumper fee. They'll let you know if they're going to reimburse it, which often that's not, preferred. Because like I said, it's not like it's $10 or $15. You're talking about hundreds of dollars that it goes up to. So up front, the broker will quite often let you know that, hey, when it's time to pay lumper, just give us a call on this line, and then they'll take over and pay the lumper fee. But there will be a receipt that the carrier is given that will be required to be submitted with the proof of delivery to the broker. So you're going to have that receipt showing that lumper fee was covered. Whether they paid it, whether the carrier paid it or the broker, because it has to be reimbursed if the carrier paid it. But again, that broker is still going to run a receipt showing that, even especially if they're the ones that paid it, they want that receipt showing what the lumper fee was that they covered. And it is they'll want that along with your proof of delivery. So that's what a lumper fee is. Don't go saying lumber like I was. No. Next, we have load board. You all hear load board often, I'm sure. Load boards is where people go to get loads. And, people think it's just limited to like the 123 load board or the DAT load board, but each of these companies, each of these brokerages have their own load board. So I mentioned JB Hunt, they have a load board. CH Robinson, they have a load board. All these different companies, once you have filled out a carrier packet, to sign up to do business with them, they give you access to their load boards. So you're not just getting on DAT load board every day. Sometimes you can go directly to these companies' load board and try to pull a load off of there. And also, it's great because you don't have to fill out another carrier packet. You don't have to get another updated COI because you're pulling directly off of a load board for somebody that you recently signed on with. So it'll be a much smoother transaction. Next, we're going to go over detention and layover. Detention is what is paid when a carrier is detained at a location. Now, on average, most often, you'll see that when a carrier arrives to a shipper, they give them 2 hours to load them before they are considered to be going into detention. And the same on the back end. When they get to the receiver, they have 2 hours to unload them before they're considered to be going into detention. Now, be careful with the raycons because they are getting really tricky now where they're you got to notify the broker an hour before your carrier goes into detention, or you have to notify your broker within 30 minutes of going into detention, or they're not going to pay detention. It would be a hell of a slip up for you to miss that you were supposed to notify that broker 30 minutes before he went into detention, and to have that carrier sitting there for 2, 3, 4 hours and they're not getting paid for it because of your slip up. So again, make sure you read the raycon so you know what terms you're agreeing to. You will know to let your carrier know, like, hey, let me know at least 30 minutes before you go into detention so I can let them know. Or let me know at least an hour before you go into detention so I can let them know. Set you a little alarm because these are part of the requirements now. And if you don't do it, then they're not going to pay out. And of course, it would be lovely for them not to have to pay out. Now, you can almost always assume that when it comes to tires that they're going to go into detention. The carriers know as well. It's just how it goes. It takes forever for them to unload and load those tires. And so with detention, again, those terms are within the raycon, so you'll have to pay attention to what is being agreed upon. Now, the reason these brokers will say, let me know an hour before they go into detention, or let me know 30 minutes before they go into detention, because they have relationships with these shippers and receivers. So sometimes it's somebody they can call on the phone that if you let them know early enough, they can prevent your carrier from going into detention because, hey, an hour ahead of time you called and now they called the office and said, hey, I got a driver. I got a I got someone picking up this load and they're about to go into detention. Do you think you can get them on in there? So you want to make that call that they're telling you to make 30 minutes to an hour prior. And sometimes what I've also been seeing, like some of these shippers or these brokers, they already know what shippers take long and what receivers take long. So what they've been doing now is, instead of allotting you 2 hours before you can claim detention, some of the paperwork is saying you can't get paid detention until it's been at least 4 hours. And that may be a load that you have to think twice if you want to take it, because if you already know it could take up to 4 hours, first of all, if they're putting that on the paperwork, it's probably going to take that amount of time. And you don't want your carrier just sitting there not making any money because they're waiting to be loaded or unloaded. So again, pay attention to the rate cons that you are signing on their behalf. Now, detention on average, like I said, the rate con is already going to say what that brokerage says that they pay for detention. So it could say $25 an hour, $50 an hour, $75 an hour, $100 an hour, so on and so forth. But after 8 hours, it turns into a layover. So they don't continue to pay for, hourly. Once it hits 8 hours, they give you a flat rate. So quite often it'll say like, I'll give you $150 for that layover. And that will mean it's 8 hours or more that their carrier had to sit before they were able to be loaded or unloaded. And that happens often when a shipper or receiver is backed up, or they have like some type of outage or emergency and there's nothing they can do about it. They'll tell you like, okay, we'll give them $150 for that layover on top of what they're getting paid for completing that load. Which takes us to LTL. LTL is less than a truckload. So we already talked about how the truckloads, the max capacity is like 45,000 pounds. So sometimes you'll see LTL can also be known as a partial load. So less than a truckload or partial load, that's when it's nowhere near the full truckload, the 45,000 pounds. So you could be having that carrier pick up a load that's only 10,000 pounds. And in that case, that broker is not going to want to pay you what that lane is worth. Remember, we talked about the lane being an order to destination. So when you're booking on the load board, you'll see that it says that, hey, on average, this lane pays $1,500. If it is LTL or a partial load, they're not going to want to pay nowhere near that $1,500, because in their eyes, you can pick up another load, or that carrier can pick up another load and move to at once. You will find some carriers that are giving you less than a truckload, but they also still don't want that carrier to pick up another load. And in that case, you do need to be trying to get the max for the lane, because you have me pulling a load that is a partial load and you're restricting me to only this load. So in that case, yeah, you do need to pay me what that lane is worth. However, in situations where they're picking up a partial load and they're giving you the freedom to say, go ahead, book another one if you want to, just make sure my stuff is dropped on time, then you don't expect them to pay you what that lane is worth. Next, we have FCFS. Now, most of the time when you're dealing with a refrigerated truck, they will have appointment times, like specific appointment times to be on site to get unloaded or to get loaded, because again, it's very sensitive since it's refrigerated and it has to be a certain temp. And maintained at a certain temp to not ruin whatever the commodity is. And so outside of those, you'll see something that says FCFS, which is first come, first serve. So this is letting you know that when you'll look on the Raycon and where it says time that it needs to be picked up or time that it needs to be delivered, it'll say FCFS and it'll have hours. It'll have a window. So it'll say, hey, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. FCFS, meaning get there within this time window, and we're going to load you or unload you on a first come, first serve basis. So it's going to be in your carrier's best interest to get there as early as possible, be one of the first ones there so you can hurry up and get loaded, and vice versa, so you can hurry up and get unloaded. But note that when it's FCFS, they don't have a specific time, meaning now when you start talking about this detention stuff, that can be a little tricky because they didn't have a specific time that they needed to be there. However, there's still ways to get that, if that carrier has been on site. But when they put that FCFS, it's because they're making it a little more difficult for you all to be able to get that detention, since they never really gave you a specific time that you needed to be there. Next, we have 1P, 1D. This goes with the picks and drops. When you see these are great on the load board. It's saying it's one pickup, one drop. Sometimes you'll see two P, two Ds, two pickups, two drops. So that's letting you know how many receivers they have to go to and how many shippers they have to go to. Most of the time, carriers would prefer not to have to go, or if they have to go pick up from two different shippers, but they're dropping at one receiver. That's not too bad. But they don't want to be. Sometimes it gets to one pickup, three drops, four drops, five drops. And think about it. When you're talking about these drops, you're talking about the possibility of detention, and it goes into a domino effect because if they end up in detention in one, they're going to end up in detention in the next, and next, and next. So now their whole 2-3 days have been taken up because they were trying to deliver a load that was one pick and three drops or four drops. So when you are negotiating, because sometimes if you're talking about specifically relying on a load board, sometimes this is all that's available. And if it comes down to that, then you're going to want to make sure that you got that carrier compensated for the amount of drops they have to make or the amount of pickups they have to make. So think about yourself in that situation, like you're going to multiple different places to pick up. And like I said, these brokers will try to get you by saying, oh, they're just 10 miles away from each other, or they're just 5 miles right up the street in the same warehouse, just 2 rows down, but still, it's still that the potential of being put into detention. And it could just be a headache more than anything. So when you see 1P, 1D in the comments, they're telling you, hey, it's just one pickup, one drop. So this is a favorable load. Next, we have touch freight. Or slash driver assist is what that should have said. So touch freight is when they want, there's no lumper, not lumber like I was saying, but there's no lumper. So that means that when that carrier gets on site, they want them to assist in loading or unloading themselves. Again, this is something that most carriers don't want to fool with, and you'll know that if it's included on your carrier profile. They'll let you know, hey, no, not happening. I'm not trying to load or unload anything. And there's also some that'll say they don't mind, but regardless, if it does say that, you need to make sure that you negotiate more money because your carrier has to actually get out and load or unload these commodities. So again, it's also stuff like I've had brokers slip that in on the rate con where I'm like, wait a minute, like, no, you didn't say nothing about touch freight. Let me make this phone call. And if you accidentally sign it, you're going to have one pissed off carrier when they find out that you've signed a contract on their behalf saying that they're going to touch some freight. And they were not trying to do that. They were trying to sit in a truck and have some coffee. And which leads me to the last one, which is no touch freight, which is the favorable load, which is what you'll see often where it says no touch, meaning there's a lumper there and, somebody else is responsible for loading or unloading. So make sure you all tuck these away in your pocket. You're going to need this terminology. You're going to need this information as you book loads. I hope this helps. If you already have the course, this is already included within your course and some other terminology that you'll also have to use on a regular basis. I'll see you guys next time. Any questions, leave them in the comments.